I bought this yellow box with my first pay as an apprentice, and it was a toolbox, brand new, perfect, no scratches, and it was to put my tools in. I was so excited about being an apprentice. The first place I worked was in this maintenance shed, and here gathered about 20 people who did maintenance on the coal mining equipment. Now, what I want to tell you about today is our shop steward. Every industrial site, at least in Australia, is unionised, and the shop steward is a person that speaks to you about the union and to the union about you. Well, the shop steward in my workshop was a communist, and he kind of hit on me in as much as he could see that I was an idealistic young 15-year-old, and he thought, here's a good prospect to become a communist. And so he talked to me often, and we were in the workshop quite a lot because we didn't do a whole lot of work, and that's what he encouraged, don't work for the bosses. So we had a lot of free time. And he told me about Russia. He told me about the Soviet Union. He didn't just tell me, he showed me wonderful pictures. They weren't photographed, but marvelous paintings of young people doing hard work and being victorious and producing food and having a great life. Well, I was a pretty enthusiastic Christian. So I said to him, let's do a deal. I don't know anything about communism. I'll read a book about communism if you read a book about being a Christian. He said, okay. And so he produced this book next day called Dialectical Materialism. This would be the most boring book that I've ever tried to read. And I produced a little book on becoming a Christian, which was like a kind of a comic book. And the deal was that we'd go away and we'd read these books and then discuss what we had learned. Well, the truth is that neither of us read the books. I actually got a bit discouraged. This man, our shop steward, had a nice personality, but I didn't like what he was encouraging us to do. He encouraged the men in the workshop to steal from work, to take tools and electrical wires and things home for their own jobs, because he said, you're not really robbing from anyone, you're just robbing from the bosses. And so the whole world was divided between the workers and the bosses. And so one day I found him in our shower block taking the locks off the cubicles. And I said to him, why are you doing this? Why are you unscrewing them and leaving them without any locks? Oh, well, he said, these don't belong to you, they belong to the bosses. And I need these at my home, so I'm taking them home. And the bosses will have to get some new ones for you. Well, that kind of finished me, and I decided, I don't think I'm going to be a communist. At the time I was living in Yallourn. That was a city owned by the power company, but it was not a bad city. But I was in one of the men's hostels, the only young person in the men's hostels, and they had about 2,000 people in the men's hostels, mostly migrants from overseas, from war-torn Europe. And however, because it was my habit, I went to church. And at church, in the Methodist church, I found this great bunch of young people, and I really liked them. And also in the Methodist church, there were some people who would take us into their homes. Now, you just can't imagine when you live in a big hostel, 2,000 people living in hostels. The people in the town saw themselves as different, and so did the people in the hostel. And so most of them never ever got into a home in the town. But I was invited in, and so was our youth group. And we had meals around the kitchen table, and I really liked that. But every time we met, there was always stories about Jesus. There was always songs about Jesus. There were always prayers. We were encouraged to care for each other, and I believe that even though we were teenagers, we were really trying to do that. And that kind of made sense to me. Now, I don't believe, as I believed then, the things that I took absolute face value. I think twice about some stories in the Bible, some of the things that I was taught about how God controlled everything. I don't think about that. I don't actually believe a lot of that now. A few months back, I was privileged to be in a class of young people. I suppose you'd call it a Sunday school class. There were 13 teenagers in the room. And I asked them questions. What do you think about God? What do you think about Jesus? And whilst they appreciated Jesus as a good person, the whole question about God seemed to miss them. That is, they didn't have an answer. And then I went on and asked, well, why do you come to church on Sundays? Because most of these young people were from families where if they insisted they weren't going, they could have stayed at home. And they said to me, well, we come for friendship. We come because here in this place it feels safe. We come because here in this place we feel welcome. It's not the beliefs, but it's the atmosphere that we like, and that's why we come. And thinking back, it was very similar to me when I was being, if you like, tempted to be a communist. It was the atmosphere and the welcome of my youth fellowship and the church that made me decide, no, this is not the road that I'm going to walk on. And I think still, our young people are more questioning than ever, but however, they respond to friendship and to welcome, to seeing us in our homes and for us to seeing them in their little dens or places of relaxation. I want to spend my life encouraging them, and I want to spend my life sharing. And if they don't want my ideas about God and Jesus, I certainly want them to experience my friendship.